So Felicity, a bit of background on Felicity. She works remotely for a strategic communications agency based in Cologne in Germany, and that's called Open Strategy Partners. So the agency works with a lot of open source clients and other digital agencies. So in a first for Write the Docs conferences literally anywhere, Felicity is going to be hosting a panel discussion with an expert documentarians on the topic Tech Comms Today. Outside of work, Felicity is a bit of a keen crafter and has been a judge on the Open Source CMS Typo 3's Best Website Awards, and also a long-time contributor of the Good Docs project as well, which that name may be familiar. It's going to be an interactive discussion with both high risk and potentially high returns as a new format that other Write the Docs conferences can use. So let's make sure it goes off with a bang today, all right? Please welcome Felicity Brand.
Thank you, Jared. Yes, hi, everyone. My current role title is Communications Consultant, but I identify as a technical communicator and documentarian. I've been doing tech writing for 15 years, and for the last little while I've been working in technical content marketing, so don't judge me. I'm really interested in our industry as a whole. I submitted this idea to the conference committee because, I love all the speaker presentations, but I'm also hungry to hear from other professionals about the current state of things, and I love crystal ball gazing as well, so I like to speculate about the future. Where I work at Open Strategy Partners, we always kick off with a gratitude statement. So I'm very grateful to be here today with all of you, and I'm feeling psychological safety right now. It's been a great couple of days, deep diving into all of the things that I love the most, writing, editing, and talking about technical content. The title of our session today is Tech Comms Today, and that was actually, I thought that title would get changed at some point. So if it doesn't make any sense, technical communications is really what that is short for. I'd like to do a litmus test of the room, a quick show of hands. Are you feeling generally optimistic or pessimistic about Tech Comms Today? So optimistic about our profession? Ooh. And anyone feeling pessimistic? Ooh, all right. Well, that gives us something to work with. As Jared said, we'd really like for this panel discussion to be a big success. This is the first time that we're trying one of these at Write the Docs, and we're hoping that other conferences may adopt it as a viable option. And off the mic earlier, Jared gave me permission to, he said, in fact, make lots of mistakes. We need, fail fast. That's how we're going to learn. So I find that really liberating. I am going to introduce our panel. I just wanted to thank everyone for submitting your questions. I've done a little bit of work to categorise them to try and frame our conversation, but we're going to keep it loose. I'm going to roll with it. It's important for me to say that our panellists' opinions are their own and don't represent their employers. And without further ado, I will introduce the panel. If you could just please hold applause until the end, and we'll welcome our guests at the end. So this is the way I've written it. So first up, we have Sarah Maddox. Sarah has a long career in technical communication with experience in very large organisations like Atlassian and Google. She's experienced in software and process documentation and has worked on several AI-related projects. We also have Claire Marnie. Claire works in content design and strategy. For a long time self-employed, she has experience of a broad range of clients and projects. She's now at Kind, working with authentication software. And I'd like to introduce you to our special guest, Mel Kalfas. Mel was invited to round out our panel today to share her insight. Mel is a developer advocate and software engineer. She's at BuildKite, which is a CI/CD platform, and she dabbles in docs and is a kindred spirit who cares about effective technical content. So please welcome our panel for today. All right, so let's break the ice. I'm going to ask you each our top most voted question, just to warm up. So, don't have to spend too long on this one. And it is, what advice do you wish you had received when you were just starting out in tech comms? So, Sarah, is anything coming to mind for you?
That's a really good question. So I actually recently celebrated 10 years at Google, and they asked me, what would you tell your newbie self if you were, looking at it 10 years later? And I think a really good tip is, in your job, look for the things that you really enjoy. Look for a niche where you'll be happy. Because if you're doing something that you really enjoy and therefore do well, it's going to make things better for you and for the organisation.
Nice. And Claire, how about you?
There's a ton of things I wish I knew at the beginning, but I'm actually going to borrow from someone else, and these are two guiding principles I've always used, and I think, I've adopted, and I think are really good to know as a new writer as well, because it's about care, and that is caring for your user, caring for whoever you're writing for, and that is, don't waste their time, don't make them feel stupid. And that's about it, Martin. That might be familiar to you. That's a Jeffrey Marnell one. But I think it's really good kind of guiding principles, really simple. Yeah,
absolutely. And Mel, you're in developer advocacy. Well, you can speak to what you choose, but is there any advice you'd give to your younger self?
Well, I kind of didn't even know I was ending up in tech communication. Like, I fell into developer advocacy, really. From being a software engineer to developer advocacy, basically because I liked people and I felt like I liked the user. So I guess my advice is you don't have to know everything. There are people in your team to lean on to do the expert thing that they're experts at, like technical writing, for example. But I think it's to care about your user and really understanding their pain points so that you can craft your work to solve their problems for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So the category I have of questions is about business case for docs. So I think this is something that's come up a lot today. How do we get people to see the value in what we do? Docs are often seen as a necessary evil, despite years of campaigning. Documentarians are too often forgotten during decision making. So we want a seat at the table. We want to get invited to that meeting. Mel, what arguments have been used to invest in docs at your organisation?
I think we're really lucky because we were a developer-first company before, we had I don't actually even know the origin story of why we had docs, but docs have always been a first-class citizen, I think. So, and because we're marketing to developers, we know that they're our best piece of marketing, really. So they're seen as important in that respect, because if people find our docs and can access what our product does via our docs, then we've solved that problem. So, money.
And Claire, I had this lined up for you, but I feel like you've already answered it today. How do we demonstrate the value and quality of our documentation to management?
Well, someone suggested straight after my talk that if you just shut down the doc site, they will realise the value of docs. Don't know, up there. That's obviously quite extreme. But it would make a point, wouldn't it?
It works. I'd replace all the content with better content.
With Laura
the site
Mixon.
doesn't work. Yes, exactly.
No, without going to those extremes, I feel like the pushback is, it's important to push back on this idea that we continuously have to prove things, so that you ask questions like you would as any technical writer would. What is the value you're expecting? If you think you're the audience, what are you wanting to get out of the docs? What am I, working on for you? So I kind of think if you can turn that around a little bit, but also, do a really good job. Just be smart, use your brain, use your skills, just show them what you're made of, kind of thing. Don't worry about arguing about it.
Yeah, I like that. And Sarah, I mean, you've worked at some really large organisations. Have they always had a value for a docs team, and has that never been a problem for you?
No. So I think it always is a problem. And I actually really liked what you said in your speech, in your talk, which was if you can, throw it back on them. So one of the things that we do where I am currently is the organisation as a whole, not the technical writers, runs research on our users, which in our case is developers, and asks them all sorts of questions. And some of those questions are really, really good to be used to demonstrate the value of the documentation. So if you can ask your UX research people or marketing people to include specific questions in the survey, and just explain, it's not my job, I'm a technical writer, but it is your job. So the kind of question that's really useful is what is holding you back in your job? So whether you're asking customers or an internal developer audience, and the kind of answer you might get is learning new technologies. Well, the obvious answer is documentation. Or, how much do you suffer from missing or out of date documentation? Ask the question straight up.
Nice, thank you for that. Well, moving on, we've solved that problem. Okay, let's talk about working with others. We had a couple of questions come through. As tech writers, we work with loads of different stakeholders in our role. Mel, how does a developer advocate's role intersect with that of a technical writer?
I'm glad you asked, because the technical writer's in the room. I started as the first developer advocate without any technical writers in our company at that point. So I have learned that having a technical writer on the team is an amazing asset to me, because I don't have the same skills as they particularly do. I think we come at things from two different perspectives. Mine's generally more like terrible, fluffy narrative writing that weaves in some technical topics, but I've learned to write more instructional, useful technical writing from pairing with them. And I think I bring, and then my colleague might write a blog post, and then I might point out that perhaps we should frame the problem from the community's perspective. So I kind of know the community and the developers, but he's probably the more expert on crafting the technical language and writing. So it's very well written and very instructional and does its job. But there's a beautiful blending of the two types of approaches when you get to pair like that. It's really good.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I know from experience, sometimes I can be in a role writing for users and I've never spoken to a user. So it's wonderful to be that close to your users. Okay, we had another question, which I guess I'll ask to Sarah. How can technical writers and product designers collaborate to ensure the best outcome for our product's users?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, in my experience, one of the problems that I've encountered when dealing with product designers is just a complete lack of understanding on both sides of the other's strengths. So if you can, first of all, just understand what the other person or the other group of people does really well, that's super useful. So from our point of view as technical writers, we could even think of offering the UX folks some training in basic technical writing principles, just to help them understand on a practical level. And then having offered them that, maybe ask for the reverse. And then also sit in on some UX studies and see what we can learn. And on the positive side, one thing I've discovered is that technical writers tend to be very, very methodical. And so when we ask a UX person, and I'm thinking more about UX research now than design, when we ask a UX research person to put together a UX study for us, we tend to give them a lot more information than other people do, and they really, really like that. So basically, know your strengths and build on them.
Nice. All right, we have another question about working with others. Claire, you may be familiar with this one. I know I am. A lot of our deliverables overlap sometimes with marketing. Have you got any advice for how tech comms and marketing comms can come together, particularly when marketing might want to stick their oar into things like feature releases and updates, or even change logs.
That is a whole talk, isn't it, really, about this
Yes.
invisible glass wall that's between us.
Yes.
And I literally worked somewhere where there was an actual glass wall between the product team and the marketing team. And I think that we have a lot more in common than we give each other credit for. If we want them to tell the truth and do less fluff, then they need to know the product better. So we're responsible for helping them do that. And if we want to understand what they bring to the business, because they keep the business going, right? If they're bringing in customers by what they're doing, even if it's with, I had this conversation, garbagey SEO type articles and other things like that, if they're driving traffic to our business that is keeping our business alive and keeping our jobs, they're doing something. So I don't want to judge that. I feel like I stay in my lane on some things, but on other things we should collaborate really closely and make sure there's clear mutual understanding, and they're not telling porky pies and then the product team get really shitty because they have to try and build something that was promised by a marketer.
Yeah, I'm getting flashbacks. We should have had a trigger warning on this one.
Yeah.
Anything you'd like to add to that, Mel?
Yeah, so I sit in a marketing team, which is at odds with everything I believe, but no, not quite. So we went through this big change where we had our first ever quarterly release. That was like a big bang of like, here's all our features that we worked on, and look at us, we're great. But it was written in a vacuum of a product marketing manager that just wrote the content, right? And it was just like feature name, releasing it, feature name, release, feature name, and it was like none of the value. Like as a user, when I go to your release page, I need to know what value or what problems your features solve for me, right? So it's again along the lines of narrative style or problem style documentation rather than like recipes to solve a particular problem. So that was all missing. It wasn't a great release. The team changed. That person no longer works with us. And then we inherited it, and we were like, we're a developer-first company. Let's try to spend the time. It was a lot more work to really unpack with product managers what the feature was for, what problems it solved for developers, and then really craft the narrative. It took a lot of work and effort, but it was a very rewarding, and the metrics actually showed that there was a huge uptick in the engagement. We linked to the docs, we linked to any GitHub repos, that we tried to have like screencasts of the feature in action, and it was like, wow, well, there you go. So we're changing the way marketing works, hopefully.
That's what a fantastic story. Sarah, do you have any recollections you'd want to chip in on this one with siloed marketing departments?
Yes, I do. So it's a similar story in that at first things started off a little bit rocky because we didn't understand what the marketing team was doing, and vice versa. But then we just kind of talked to each other quite a lot, and what we discovered is a few of the things that they do really, really well is producing case studies, so really in-depth, detailed case studies with lots of statistics and customer stories, and also things that they call value propositions or value props, which we persuaded them to call value statements rather. And once they started doing those as a kind of adjunct to the documentation, that is working really, really well for us. And the team is actually called now a go-to-market team, which is a slightly different thing from marketing, because they see themselves at that place just when the product is ready to go to market. What needs to be done at that point in order to, make it useful for the user?
That piece like the feedback to actually shape the product itself, because like going to market
Needs to be able to be used and received well by the market that it's going to, and if it's not quite right as a feature, perhaps there's more license to influence the shape of it, so it's received better and marketed well. That's really cool.
Yeah, it is. I think especially important when your audience is developers too, because like you said, they do read the docs, right? They do read things. So you can't kind of pull the wool over their, fluff.
They will ignore the fluff.
Yeah.
I keep saying, like, why are we doing this release? Developers are allergic to shiny. They would rather see it look like a terminal. You know, they don't need animation.
Thank you for those stories. It was just reminding me at a previous company, because as tech writers we were in the dev team, we work with the marketers, are on another floor, and I remember a marketer saying to me, how come you're allowed to wear jeans to work? So they're on the marketing floor with their fab glasses and their, professional outfits, and we're rocking up in our jeans and Crocs. And it was, the culture was just so different. So it just kind of further solidified that silo, and it makes it really difficult to work together when we do such similar craft. Good news, folks. We have time for audience questions. So we're going to do an Ask Me Anything kind of answer your questions.
All right, so does anyone have any general questions? Is that how we want to do it?
Yeah, questions for the panel.
Far away. This is your opportunity.
What is a developer advocate?
I didn't want anyone to ask that question.
Good question.
I need to practice this for Christmas parties, right? Like when I go to the family thing and they go, what do you do? All right, so different for every company. It really, really depends. It's pretty much everything. Like a lot of the people in this room have already done talks that I'm like, that's very developer advocate. You're talking about your product, you're helping people use it better, you're producing technical docs, you are writing blog posts, you might be making demos. Essentially, it's like a little bit of everything. You could be fostering your community in a Slack channel. You could be doing social media posts for your brand. Well, that's the thing. Different flavors exist in different companies. They wouldn't let me near our code base. Pretty sure. I tried, but I don't have right access. So that's probably good. I know at Google they have their developer advocates are developer advocate engineers, or developer, I think something like that. Developer relations engineers. So if you're more leaning towards that, that's an option. I mean, yeah. So it will depend on the job ad for the company, and what their requirements are. I have seen jobs that are mostly documenting APIs. So I think all of the people in the room really are kind of. If you feel like a change and you want some chaos in your life, I'm actually the opposite. I'm all of your jobs seem so great.
Hi. Real quick before I ask my question, just do you all identify as women before? Okay, cool. My question was, because the tech industry is very male-dominated, even though here in this conference we have a lot of women, we have a lot of representation. How has it been for you guys working as women in the tech space? Do you have any advice or any tips for women looking to get into the tech space, considering we're still kind of not as represented?
Yeah, that's an awesome question, and it could be quite a difficult one to answer. So I haven't ever experienced anything unpleasant, or I haven't ever been made to feel sort of different because I'm a woman, or I can obviously see that I'm in the minority in many cases, but it's never been a real problem for me. What I have found very useful for me in particular, and this is very different for everyone else, is there are certain discussions that happen that can be quite hurtful. So I tend to keep away from them rather than getting involved. Now, other people would find it, better to get involved and have their say and try and change things. I do find that kind of discussion very hurtful, so I stay away. But that's a personal choice.
I think I got my opportunity because I was a woman. There was an event worldwide called Rails Girls, which is focused on getting women into coding. So I feel very fortunate in that respect. But I have seen all sorts of things, but I've never really, again, I'm from a privileged group. I'm middle class, white, educated, blah, blah, blah. So I don't think I've experienced the same levels of discrimination that other people would. But, you know, there are women, I find women get treated differently in the workplace. And that's just something I have observed. It affects me. I do get upset, but I don't know. Yeah, it depends on the day. Sometimes I fight, sometimes I don't. But it is a constant battle.
And it's exhausting to kind of fight that all the time. I find myself less concerned. I'm same white, privileged, educated person. Haven't had, you know, challenges other people have. And I find that I find myself advocating more for others in that space because I want to use the opportunity to do that. And my company actually has a really bad imbalance of male to female workers, although we've got a couple of female developers, which is great and things like that. It's not you know, a kind of accident, small company, it happens. But I actually called out something the other day in a meeting where, so we have an all hands every Friday, and the CEO always does the main founder sort of always does the vision, you know, kind of thing, steer the ship, and takes inspiration from somewhere usually. And last week it was like an Elon Musk story about him, you know, some sort of success of some kind. And I called out in the all hands, and because it is a safe workplace, I was able to call out and so just say, can we not just always use tech bros to make points about success in technology and other things? I think we can dig a bit deeper and find, you know, a variety of inspiration. So I think calling things out when you see them is important if you aren't experiencing them.
Also, yeah, like when you see someone do good work that is from a marginalised group in your industry, in your workplace, you highlight their work because often they don't get the same highlighting that other people get. Yeah, there is a lot of like camaraderie.
Thank you. I guess this isn't so much of a question as I just wanted to add that like reviewing sites like Glassdoor and places that leave reviews can be a really important thing as a woman when reviewing tech safety, because not every company has a healthy work environment for women. So looking at Glassdoor reviews, and actually when you are interviewing, taking the time to ask them what they have in place to ensure your safety is really important as well. Because seeing what their policies are and seeing what they have reveals a lot. And when you're interviewing, you're also interviewing them as a company, if it's somewhere you want to work and where you will feel safe. Yeah.
Panel, any thoughts on that? Any further thoughts?
I think it's really important to point out the kind of intersectional part of like that as well. So it's often a marginalised person could be anyone, could be one person of different accessibility needs and other things like that. So I think all of that advocacy is important and is related in that sense as well.
I think that might be all the ones we have in this particular audience. I might just hand you back now to the host with the most, Felicity.
Cool. Well, we might be able to get an early mark today.
I did actually think of a really good answer for that first question.
Awesome.
Which
Let's
was
go back there.
about the how to convince the business to kind of take on the tech writing. And I think it came from Janet's talk, which was she found a really good problem that they cared about. So if you can identify what that problem is that the business cares about, as opposed to like even the developers or the users, then that's your inroad to kind of change. Yeah.
I read a thing about, it was a talk about developer advocacy, but it was like to succeed in your business, understand the problem that the CEO is currently having anxiety about and helping solve that. And I guess as writers, that'd be the same thing, potentially.
Yeah, well, have you heard of that product, the docs is the product, or product as docs? And so where a software product has a product manager and they have resources and loads of meetings, you treat the docs as a product and you have a docs manager and you're at all those same meetings, and it tries to kind of elevate the view of your role and the work that you do.
I actually heard it put slightly differently, which I thought was really, really cool. Instead of saying documentation is a product, my manager has started saying documentation is one of the product surfaces. And that's really interesting because, you know, the product has a UI and an API and SDK and documentation.
That's lovely. I'm going to take that away. Well, folks, if we don't have any other questions, all that remains is for me to wrap up. So I was going to ask if anyone had changed their minds from the original poll we took at the beginning, but you were all pretty optimistic. So I'm hoping none of you has changed your mind to being pessimistic. Okay. I'd like to thank you all for sharing your knowledge and views with us today. Special thanks to Mel for coming along and joining us, and I hope you felt like this was a safe space for you among documentarians. Sarah and Claire, thank you for agreeing to add to your speaker duties to appear on the panel today. Everyone, I hope you've gotten as much out of this as I have, so could you please all thank our panelists. And thank you.